I don't know if you thumbed through the thousands of pages of the budget report, but I was wondering what you made of it in terms of where the cuts are coming from in order to bolster other programs such as defense.
Yeah, well, thank you. I think there's three things that should worry people about this budget. Number one, it is completely directed towards a kind of the hard base of Donald Trump. And the reason that should worry even people who are not budget wonks like myself is that if we have another big fight at the end of the year, it won't just be about the budget shutdown, about the government shutdown. It will probably be about the debt limit. And so when you have the president bracing up with huge cuts to Medicaid, another huge $8.6 billion for the wall, you have to worry whether he is already aiming for a degree of volatility and dysfunction that could even affect whether we default on the debt. Number two, it's an enormously gimmicky budget. I don't think I've ever seen such inflated economic numbers, and the effort to try to hide $165 billion in the defense budget. Why not just say you're for the increase? And third, goes to the area you mentioned in the cuts. I mean, this is so inconsistent with what I think most American people are for, and even what Donald Trump has said. He liked to brag he wasn't going to go after Medicare and Medicaid. You know, in its least generous interpretation, it cuts Medicaid by $1.5 trillion. Even if you look at what they plow back into their kind of block grant, which I don't think much of, it's still an $800 billion cut in subsidies, and Medicaid will cost millions of people health care. And then on Medicare even, they have $800 billion in cuts. And on their discretionary budget, yes, he's got some increase for Homeland Security, but if you care about science, if you care about affordable housing, if you care about the environment, there are deep, harsh cuts across the board. So I think this is a very, very partisan and harsh budget, and I think it worries me on both policy grounds and what it says for how the president plans to govern in the next 2 years.
Gene, I want to talk about your article about economic dignity. It was philosophically a very interesting argument to put forth, particularly in the context of these discussions about the budget. Whenever you bolster one program, the money's got to come from someplace else. So in thinking about economic dignity, and you're talking about the cuts, for instance, in Medicare and Medicaid, et cetera, I mean, is Medicare for all economic dignity? Is free college tuition for all economic dignity? And how do you pay for that dignity?
You know, so what I say in the article in Democracy Journal is that economic dignity is really about three things: your ability to not just care for your family, but to be able to enjoy have the time to enjoy the beautiful, great, universal joys of family, to be able to pursue your potential and purpose, and three, to be able to work with respect as opposed to domination and humiliation. And what my focus is that we as a country should be looking at the end goal. I do think that having a basic degree of health security is absolutely essential for economic dignity. What is worse as a parent than feeling that if you had a sick child, you either couldn't care for them or you'd have to bankrupt your family? I mean, that goes to your core of any kind of economic dignity. My focus is it's not about saying you're just for one solution. It's about insisting that health care, I think, should be a right, that there should be universal health security. But as a country, we should insist on that principle of economic dignity, but we can be open to different solutions to getting there as long as you actually make the test the one of economic dignity, and in this case, true health security.
Gene, if there were a consensus to be built that, in fact, health care should be something that the government guarantees across the board, what's the mechanism you see most likely? Would it be kind of just a public option, or just sort of a general subsidy? How do you think that might shake out?
Well, you know, it's a good question, because, again, if you're asking what the end goal is, the people for Medicare for All make the point, and they have a lot of good arguments, that if we were starting from scratch, this might be a more efficient, certain way to do it. But I do think if you look at the experience with the Affordable Care Act, what disturbed people was the holes that weren't being filled. And so, yes, some kind of a large public option that was available to everybody. For some people, that might be the end goal. For some, that might be a stepping stone. For some, that would be a way of having a mixed solution of markets and government. But again, my focus should be on, is it working? Is it actually providing that economic security for all? We just should not be a country where somebody has a child that has a very serious or rare disease, and because of that, it bankrupts their family with lifetime limits, or people can't get the coverage that they need. That is very basic, and I think what we need to do is insist that everybody have a plan and a promise that they're going to achieve that, and then we as a country can be open to judging and looking at those different options. I think certainly some kind of major Medicare buy-in with really strong coverage might be the best way or the most realistic way to get there. I'm not shutting the door to other options, and I think the people with Medicare for All make a lot of good points about efficiency, but politically, realistically, what I'm suggesting here is probably a more realistic way to achieve that goal of health care as a right.